Okay. Just going to post a message in the chat box as well. So if you do have any problems with audio at any point during the session, the first thing to try is logging out, then logging back into the session. And that usually fixes most problems. So hopefully that will sort out anything there. Just give people a couple of seconds just to click on the raise hand icon. Most people have done that. Okay. Right. What I'll do is I'm just going to lower all of those hands as well now. Okay. So just to move on. So as I said, there will be a recording of this session made available in the Pearson Music community pages, and there's a link in the slides at the end to those to the Pearson Music community page. The other thing is just to let you know that there is a chat function available in the session. So if you've got any questions, you can put them in there, and I'm happy to answer things. There is time, hopefully, at the end of the session for questions. So if at all possible, please do sort of wait until then to ask most things. But there's something that really needs to be asked at that point, I will try and answer that as well. So let's move on. Just first thing really is that I hope the results days went well for everyone in the end. Obviously there was a lot of changes happening for all qualifications around that time. So hopefully things have settled down now, and you're getting used to well, getting back into centres now and preparing for the new year. So while we're looking and talking about results, just around resubmissions, we did say around the internally assessed units around resubmissions that learners would be granted an opportunity to resubmit any of the internally assessed units that received a calculated grade. That's now reverted to obviously the teacher centre assessment grades. So probably mainly unlikely that there would be resubmission opportunities needed, but maybe you may have some learners that wish to improve on that, and there's still going to be some further details around how that resubmission will work for those units. So onto the main sort of thing around the delivery and assessment for this academic year. There are, as I say, still several things that we need to confirm at this point. We are continuing to work with Ofqual and DFE and some other awarding organisations to confirm what amendments and mitigations can be made for BTEC in this next academic year. When I set up this session and organised it earlier in the summer, I was hoping that we would be in a position to be able to share much more information at this point. Unfortunately, we don't have all the final details right now. So this presentation has changed slightly from what I was hoping and intending it to be, but I can run through the main points and some tips and guidance really when thinking about each qualification and units and the types of units in that in each one of those as well. So around the confirmation of this, it's hoped that we will be able to give more news around this by mid-September. We are, as I said, still working with Ofqual and DFE on this, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have things confirmed and be able to share much more information around this. There was a consultation from Ofqual around vocational qualifications that closed on the 14th of August. I think we're still waiting for the outcomes for that. I hadn't seen them as yet. But the intention from Ofqual overall is for the teaching and learning content that's included in units or components is to be delivered still. So to not miss out any of the sort of content that should be taught to learners. However, what they do want to do is to focus and streamline the assessment parts of the courses. And I'll run through that in more detail in a minute. But just as a kind of tip in terms of the teaching of the content, we would say that it would be a good idea to probably focus more on the mandatory content and assessment first. Obviously, we don't know at this point what may happen throughout the year and how centres may be affected as well. But the key thing for vocational qualifications and BTECs is going to be probably focusing more on the mandatory content and assessment first. That may then need you to have a look at your assessment plan a little bit, depending on which course you're delivering, and think about how that can be arranged this year as well. And as I said, there's a focus and advice to try and streamline the assessment. And what that can mean is to look at combining assessment criteria. So it would be looking at your internally assessed units and looking at common assessments. So, for example, in some specifications, there's performance units that assess performances at different points or different types of performances, and it might be worth looking at whether you can combine that into one assessment and cover that in a larger project assessment rather than assessing at different points, and that will allow you time to deliver the teaching and learning content as well by streamlining the assessment. So a couple of questions just come in as well. Had a merit move to a pass in the first results. With the new results, it's still only a pass. With that, I believe that the internally assessed units should have been changed to the central assessment grades. That's something that you may need to look into or get an exams officer to check on that as well. What about the Tech Awards? All our content is mandatory. We are going to struggle to fit everything in with Unit 3 exam. Yes, understand concern about the Tech Awards. I know that that's been a major thing since sort of lockdown, really, and how it's going to affect what will be your Year 11 cohort for this academic year. I can't confirm anything at the moment, but there are things that we are looking at to work and make things work for the Tech Awards. So there will hopefully be some mitigations for them, but at this point I can't confirm anything or go into any detail around what that may be, because there's still lots of things to sort out with that, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll be able to confirm that. You're recommending that we begin our new Year 10s on the mandatory units as well. For new Year 10s, possibly not, because we just don't know what will happen with their qualifications, because of how things may develop throughout this year. For them, because they're going to be completing in 2022, I would probably say that you could still deliver their qualifications as you would intend normally, because I think everyone is hoping that by academic year 2021-22 things will be very much back to normal, and you can focus on delivering that as normal. But it's still probably not for certain, and how it may affect them this year. But the advice for New Year 10s, I think, would be to continue as you normally would. It's mainly about the mandatory content, focusing on your completing learners that would complete this academic year. So going into a little bit more detail around the sort of streamlining for specific courses. So thinking about the BTEC first, where I know several teachers are still delivering BTEC first, and obviously one of the major difficulties that I think lots of centres will find if they're still doing this is obviously around Unit 2, which is the music product, and delivering that. Got some suggestions for that in a little minute as well, but also about combining Unit 2 with at least one of the optional units, and the skills units included in the specification. So obviously popular units to combine with Unit 2 would be Unit 5 performing or Unit 6 recording, depending on the type of product that you do in your centre. So projects to consider instead of a live event, where you're combining the performing and Unit 2, could be an online event using Zoom. So that can be, you can still get your learners to plan the event and work on the marketing and everything around that as you normally would. As I said, if necessary, those sorts of meetings can move to online meetings as well. And then you can organise an online event which you can still invite an audience to with that as well. And then obviously a recording project, lots of centres produce a CD or an album or something like that with the Unit 2, so including Unit 6 recording in there, or even Unit 7 the sequencing. So considerations for those sorts of projects would obviously be around social distancing in recording sessions, and the timings of those sessions to allow the equipment to be used safely. So considering what can be cleaned without probably breaking it in terms of recording equipment, or left for a suitable length of time as well, so that it is safe to use again. Just got a couple of questions come in again. Sort this out with off-qual, but I hope that a decision is made where teachers can miss out parts of components. I imagine I am not the only teacher who will massively struggle to deliver all three components. Yeah, so we are working obviously with DFE and off-qual to see what can be done, particularly with the Tech Award. It's not just a music issue. I think it's a suite-wide issue with Tech Awards because of the three component structure, and naturally you would get one component which spans the academic years, which has obviously caused some problems with the centre assessment grades, mainly around component 2, because you couldn't claim those due to the window that they could be claimed within. So would it be possible to combine Unit 4 and 7 into one assessment for Year 11s? They've already have Unit 1 and Unit 2 done. Yes, certainly. So the composing and sequencing in the BTEC first, I presume you're talking about there, yeah, that would be perfectly fine to combine those, as long as you can come up with an assessment that will meet the criteria for both of those units. Can I just confirm that teacher assessed grades for these units still stand? We've got the mandatory stuff left. So yeah, the teacher assessment grades for internal units are the grades that were confirmed in the end with around the results days in the end. Okay, so moving on, looking at the TEC award just briefly as well. This is more around thinking about how you can approach it and trying to make the best of your time, because obviously, as we said, everything is mandatory within the TEC award. And most people, as I said, are probably looking at how they can deliver components 2 and 3 with their year 11s this year. So looking at it and thinking about it, component 2 is focused on the individual and can be assessed, and the evidence for that can be created in and outside of the centre. So this might be trying to make the best use of time and encouraging learners to produce evidence to cover component 2 at home, outside of the centre. That you know, this can include videos, screenshots. It could include screen capture, where a learner is talking through what they're doing, maybe on a door, and it's screen capture as well. So there's a few different ways that you can approach and gather that evidence of component 2 to possibly try and make the best use of that time. But also thinking about the component 2 and the delivery of that is thinking about how that's going to impact on their approach to component 3, because obviously they have the options within component 3 to do a sort of performing arranging option or a producing arranging option. So making sure that the skills that they're developing in component 2 are feeding into those that are going to be relevant for their approach for component 3. And also making sure that the delivery, you could combine the delivery of the skills of component 2 with focusing on approaching a brief and approaching different music styles in component 3 as well. So I think you may want to consider a more holistic approach in terms of the delivery across those for the TEC award, but also hopefully we will have some mitigations there for the TEC award, and I'll try and confirm those as soon as we can. But obviously you've got to consider the use of equipment in your class as well, and I'm well aware that some centres are going to be allowed into their specialist rooms and be able to use their equipment, and some centres I know are using a different approach where they won't be allowed in to use specialist music rooms, and that can obviously cause some issues and problems there with the delivery of this. And that's where maybe thinking about what evidence you can gather from outside of the centre could feed into that as well, and thinking about what equipment you can do and what teaching or assessment you can do in the rooms that you will have available. And I'm well aware that every centre is going to have their own approach and own ways of looking at this and doing this. Another consideration obviously around this is about workstations. Is it possible to have individual workstations in terms of the door and computers that are being used? One thing that we have discussed about thinking about for centres is obviously on keyboards you can get for particular doors you can get the keyboard skins which have a lot of the shortcuts and things like that, and it might be an idea to have some of those available so you can cover the keys, and that would easily allow you to clean the keys as well. So that's another approach that we were thinking about as a suggestion there as well. And then obviously other things are about shared instruments and cleaning those, and allowing time for equipment to either be cleaned or left for a suitable length of time, depending on if it's possible to clean it or not. So there are going to be all of these big impacts on the way you deliver the qualifications this year, and I think every centre is going to have their own situations with this, but it's getting you to think about ways that you can approach it and make the best use of your time and equipment that you have in your centre as well. So moving on to the nationals, I won't go into too much details around units and components for the nationals because there's so many and various different options available in there. But as I said, the focus on this is the mandatory units to deliver the teaching and learning content and to be ready for assessment, particularly for your completing learners. And then it will be about looking at the skills and assessments that are in the optional units that you're planning to deliver this year as well. Thinking about how these can be matched with the assessment criteria for mandatory units. And then thinking about, is it possible to write an assignment brief or briefs that are more project-based that will cover multiple criterion units. As an example of that, when I was delivering in a FE college on the old 2010 specification, we did move to a much more project-based system and classes where we literally just called it performance, and that covered multiple units. So it covered the performance techniques unit, unit 23. It covered unit 40, which is an ensemble unit, and it covered the practical criteria from unit 30, which was pop music and practice as well. So we had projects set up and assignments based around large projects that were assessing criteria from those three different units. So making it and much more streamlining the assessment, and that's what we would want to sort of see a bit more of this year, I think, in terms of that. But obviously there are going to be situations where not everything is possible to deliver as well at this point, and you may have to think about what units you may need to delay delivering and seeing how things develop due to the social distancing or and other impacts like that. So it may be that you do have to consider that you might need to delay delivering some units and change your assessment plan around from what it would normally be as well. So now just moving into more looking at the sort of bigger topics around that are included in the specifications and ways that you can sort of plan and maybe think about ways of delivering these. So looking at like the events and products type units. So these are sort of the planning and management and delivery of an event. So as I said earlier, real encouragement here would be to move away from a live event and moving it to like an online virtual gig or festival as an idea. Obviously, depending on situations with centres this year, we may get situations where centres may have to close or a year group is sent home, or who knows what situations there may be. But if it is possible for you in your centre, it could be that you continue with this and use Zoom as a way or similar platform to hold the meetings, to organise these as well. And also using Zoom webinar platform for managing the event. It's a bit more sophisticated in that way. And also doing things like radio broadcasts or podcasts could be a way of approaching the events rather than doing live events in that way. Also, just thinking about events, learners can still fully experience the areas of planning and budgeting, marketing and working as a team. And actually, if you're doing online sort of meetings, it's certainly possible to record and save those meetings. So you can build up the evidence for those as well. Just having a look at a couple of questions that are coming in. Can combination assignment brief examples post on the website? I can look into that, see if it's possible to get a few of those. I'm not sure about timescales that we could do on that and how quickly those can be turned around and made available, but I can certainly inquire around that. Can we use YouTube to do the events? Local authority won't let you use Zoom. That's live and then put on YouTube. I don't see a particular problem with using YouTube for that or any other platform that would allow you to do that and pre-recording the performances in that way. I think that'd be fine. So what happens for those using my BTEC? Will calcs be pushed for last year's units? I will have to confirm with my BTEC team. If you want to submit that as a question through the portal, again, there's a link to that at the end of these slides. I can pass that on to my BTEC team as well. So if you put that in as a query, I'm more than happy to get an answer for you that way. Any assignment briefs released for radio program podcast style assignments? I'm not sure in terms of authorized assignment briefs what more will be made available at this point, but that's something I can look into. So are there any other options than Zoom? So yeah, Teams would be fine. Google Classrooms, there's Google Meets. Yeah, there's a few different options there. There's just Zoom is kind of the one that I suggested there, but yeah, there are other platforms that you could be using. So here's a kind of list of units that the events sort of planning stuff applies to. So it may be well relevant to something that you're delivering as well. Obviously, performing. The biggest concern is probably around ensemble performance. Obviously, with the BTEC Nationals, in music performance, you've got the mandatory external assessment, which is ensemble music performance. And it may be necessary to think about group sizes in that. Obviously, there is the requirement to be at least 3 musicians in that one, but you could think about the size of that ensemble and the learners that you have in that space, and thinking about your own rehearsal spaces as well, and if it's possible to do that in there. Obviously, the assessment for that isn't until the new year, and we may have much more clarity on what's happening by that point. But as I said, in terms of the BTEC suite as a whole, there are much more sort of a wider sort of mitigations that are being discussed and what we can do. So there is certainly potential that if the ensemble performance is impacted, we can still work things out and have learners complete and achieve the specification and the qualification there. It may be necessary to do smaller ensembles than you would normally do, and it may lead to some, as it says, some unconventional band setups. And in other units apart from the ensemble mandatory unit, working in pairs usually for ensemble work is generally fine as well. May need to think about the particular covers that are happening. Rather than being exact replicas, it may need to be a more scaled down version, thinking of a sort of BBC Live Lounge-esque type performance of things, or it may just be an instrumental version, depending on the learners that you have. But you may need to adapt it for, thinking of the size and the combination of instruments that you have. Okay. So going on to think about the rehearsal sessions. So if you're looking at an individual, it's much easier to do individual rehearsals and looking at it in that way, because they can film themselves and develop the material in that way. But if you are having ensembles, it may be necessary to have a learner video things, depending on the spaces, as I said, and who can fit in that space at that time. It may be that you need to think about a lot more sort of carousel type teaching, where you may have one group performing, you may have another group of learners in the same class working on computers to do something else, and rotating those around maybe on weeks or in time during a particular session, depending on how long your lessons are as well. So there are different ways of approaching that and having learners approach the performance on that as well. So someone's just said, first time teaching course for Year 10 BTEC Music, so 2 students is fine for an ensemble. In most cases, yes, as I said, BTEC National is mandatory. It does say at least 3 musicians, but in most cases, an ensemble performance or performances don't specify a minimum number of people to be involved, so it should usually be okay for 2 as well. As it says, unlikely that performances will take place in front of an audience in the near future. So again, considering live streams or posting stuff on YouTube as well, private YouTube channels can be set up there as well. So there's just a few more sort of tips around that. There's a link there to the government guidance for full school opening, which does set out some information around the performing of playing of instruments or singing as well. So that would be the best thing to obviously look at in terms of the latest guidance in terms of that for schools. And there's a list of some of the units that could apply to there as well. Obviously composing can be a much more individual task. So a lot of this could continue as you would normally deliver it, but it would be worth thinking about what platforms students could have access to at home as well, that could allow them to work on things outside of the centre as well. It would be worth noting that it might need to, when exporting material and transferring it between two systems, it might need to be managed in terms of versioning and things like that as well. But also in terms of looking at that and thinking about individual workstations and making sure that students are working in the same place each session, and again, that you're allowing, if you're getting different cohorts come into that room, allowing time between the sessions to clean or leave it for an appropriate time. But as I said, also there's the options for the keyboard overlays, and which make it easier for cleaning possibly. And again, allowing feedback to happen for compositions and things like that using SoundCloud or other platforms where material can be uploaded. SoundCloud's really good because it allows you to input comments at specific points and give the feedback there as well. And again, list of units that this could apply to there as well. Sequencing, again, quite similar to composing in terms of the approach. So again, you could be using SoundCloud and things like that. Again, it's possible to think about platforms for working at home and sharing and transferring the material between the centre and maybe working at home. There's obviously a link there that can go to some free software. And again, just a tip of advice thinking about versioning and transferring the material. May be necessary to transfer things as MIDI files or individually bounce down audio to a stereo file that can be transferred depending on how they're working on things. So I will just, there's a few things around there about online tutorials for doors as well, which could help learners get used to the equipment much quicker on there as well. And again, some units that these sort of bits of advice can apply to there. Again, recording. This may be one of the more difficult things to approach for centres because of the nature of the spaces, the lack of probably ventilation in centres as well, and the equipment that is being used. Obviously, if you're using mixing desks, microphones, there's lots of buttons and potentiometers and things like that on a mixing desk, faders, and it wouldn't be possible to go through cleaning that. And certainly microphones you wouldn't want to be disinfecting in any way as well. So that sessions around these may need to be considered a lot more in terms of the timing, and it may have to be that theoretical side of things is taught before you know how things may progress this year as well. So it may be that it's more demonstration rather than hands-on practical tasks with recording, where you or a technician is demonstrating stuff with small groups, or using video tutorials where learners are looking at the ways to set up equipment and work with it in that way. So, however, once if they do get into the practical work and you're able to manage that, it's probably possible that once they've recorded that, their material is then moved to their own machine where they can then work on that, and it then will work much more along the lines of sequencing and composing as well. So just a bit about the cleaning of mixing desks. Obviously, could be a problem there. We talked about tutorial videos, and there's a list of ideas that could be covered in video tutorials there as well. And then again, a list of units that this could apply to in there. Live sound, again, quite similar to recording, where there's going to be issues with actually doing hands-on practical work because of the equipment that's being used. And again, it may be necessary to work in small groups or use video tutorials to deliver a lot of the content early on with this. Again, a list of sort of ideas around some tutorials and video tutorials that could be done around the live sound side of things, and thinking about it as a more theoretical introduction at first. As it says, live events may not be possible for audiences, and therefore it may need to be a videoed event rather than with live audience. And then the evidence of setting up may need to be separate in some cases to the actual event to allow it to be carried out safely as well. So again, list of units where that can apply to as well. Just a little note on music theory and listening skills. This should generally be able to continue as normal, and this can either move online or can be taught in non-specialist classrooms, possibly. So this is one of the things that could probably progress as close to normal as you would expect. So you may just want to think about the resources that you have available in the classroom, and potentially how it may move online if you need to at any point in the year. Some list of some useful resources there for music theory as well, and then again, list of the units that this may apply to as well. Just having a look at some of the questions that come in there. Able to send a PowerPoint. Yeah, so in the materials section of this presentation, you should be able to download it there as well. So There we go. And now really it's we've got some time for any questions that you have. I'll try and answer anything as best I can at this point. Obviously, as I said, there are still things being worked on for all of the BTEC suite in terms of mitigations and potential sort of changes or changes to requirements. Hopefully that will come out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to share that with you. But if you have any questions at this point, please just to type them into the chat box. So someone's asking, in your talks with Ofqual, are there discussions regarding reducing the amount of evidence required for each component? There's obviously discussions around the amount of evidence required for the qualification overall, and potentially for components in the tech award as well. That is something that's being discussed and looked at. Yeah, I mean, I can't particularly say much more at this point because I mean, things aren't confirmed in any way, and we are trying to confirm these as quickly as possible. But generally, yes, the evidence required for specification qualification overall is being looked at as well. Yeah, so as soon as I have any more news in terms of confirmation from Ofqual, I'll arrange another session that can be done to clarify things for the music specifications and what how that will impact on them as well. Okay, just see if there's any more questions coming in. Give a couple of minutes. Okay, assessment of Unit 22, session styles. Assessment specifies that the performances need to be in different environments. Is this something that is negotiable? So in terms of Unit 22, I don't have the spec open in front of me, but in terms of different environments, from what I remember, that could be like a live gig type performance, or as it may turn out to be just a performance situation, maybe without an audience there, and it becomes a more sort of online event type thing. And then another environment could be more like a recording session as well. So they could be performing on a recording, and that could be something as simple as being set up in a recording session and playing along to a backing track, I think, that could work there. That would be a different environment or performance situation from my memory of the unit and ways that we used to approach that as well. So I hope that clears that up. Someone's got a specific question about a new student. So if you've got a specific question that you don't want to ask on here, you can use the Pearson contact portal and submit any questions through there. There's a link in the slides, so that can take you to the email or live chat. Obviously, I won't be on live chat at the moment, but will be later today. Yeah, so you can submit a query through the portal there, and that will come through to me, and I can answer that for you. Okay, looks like there's probably not many more questions coming in. Just to say, I hope you found this useful. Sorry I can't confirm everything at this point, but hopefully we will have further news in the next couple of weeks. And I wish you all the best for this coming year. And also, if you do have any queries at any point, please do contact me using the contact portal or through the music community pages as well.